The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Window World of Western Mass, a local family-owned and operated complete exterior remodeling business offering windows, siding, gutters, and more. windowworldofwesternma.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Real Pickles, a worker-owned cooperative in Greenfield producing organic fermented vegetables sourced from Northeast farms. More information at realpickles.com.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Today's show is extremely Amherst-centric.
But we're not just focusing on the people of the People's Republic of Amherst. We're talking poetry and peregrines.
Amherst College's literary publication, The Common, celebrates 25 years in publication this year. And for the last day of National Poetry Month, we'll hear from Editor-in-Chief Jennifer Acker and student interns Kay Lim and Aidan Cooper about poetry, prose, and publication in the digital age.
But first, Falcor!
I'm a luck dragon.
Falcons!
When you phrase it like that, it always makes it sound more insulting.
Why do you do that? We all went to school in the 1900s.
I know, but when you say it like that, it gives it a little gravitas. Yeah. Not like this young student
go
that's
to
in an
school in the
elevator with us
1900s.
right now. You go to the school in the you're a 21st century student. Congratulations. She's got noise canceling headphones on, so she doesn't have to listen to our
nonsense.
Our nonsense. Yeah, we are in an elevator at the UMass W.E.B. Du Bois Library with 1900s student Emily Brewster, resident wordster from Merriam-Webster. And what's your name?
I'm Lauren Hubbard. I'm the Associate Editor Digital Content here at the libraries.
And we're going into the library development offices. Now we have to be quiet. It's a library.
We try not to shush people here.
It's not that kind of library. Lauren, you're kind of a digital producer here, but we're here for the specific purpose of meeting the W.E.B. Du Bois's most famous residents, the Falcons.
Yes. So we have Merriam and Webster. They are our resident Falcons, and we're currently on egg watch because it takes 33 to 35 days approximately for peregrine falcon eggs to hatch, and we are at the end of that incubation period right now.
And wait a minute, what were the names of those falcons again?
Merriam and Webster.
And that's why we got Emily Brewster, resident wordster from Merriam-Webster, here with us at the library. When did you find out that the Falcons were named after your dictionary?
When you told me a couple weeks ago.
And I'll give a shout out to a listener, whose name I don't remember right now, but I will look it up.
Emily Robertson!
Who sent us an email that said, do you know that the names of the Falcons at UMass this year are Merriam and Webster? So tell us about the history of these two Falcons and how they became named Merriam and Webster.
So that's a really fun story, and it's all about the outreach to our Falcon fan community. We do public naming contests for our Falcons, and with the exception of a few where we celebrate UMass wins, so when the ice hockey team won, the UMass women's basketball team won, and last year when the UMass band played in the Macy's parade, we give them exclusive naming rights to the chicks just to celebrate UMass Amherst. But other than that, it's public naming contests, and Webster came to us first. He was been here for a couple years now. And he was named because of the W.E.B. in W.E.B. Du Bois for the namesake of our library. And then he had a partner named Cranberry. She was our female for several years. Unfortunately, she passed away last January, and then we got...
Should we mention how she passed away? Because we already brought it up on the show last week with Professor Nathan Senner.
Yeah, she unfortunately was killed by a window strike, so we are currently working with the Bird Safe Windows Project on campus to try and mitigate that going forwards.
Awesome.
So Cranberry unfortunately passed away, and as my colleague on the Falcon team says, Richard Nathorst, he says, peregrine falcons mate for life, but they do not mourn. So they will find another partner if the situation is such where they need one.
That's what I'm going to do, too.
All right, getting morbid early we go. So then a new Falcon female came last January, and we found out she was going to stick around. It was her first time being a mother last year based on the behaviors that she was exhibiting, and we were really excited to have her step in and step up, and then the public naming contest came up once we knew she was going to stick around, and everyone thought it would be really fun to give them matching names, so that's how we got Merriam and Webster, and it's just perfect for Falcons living on top of a library.
Emily Brewster, resident wordster from Merriam-Webster, U.S. ambassador of the dictionary, who didn't know about this until just recently.
recently. Does the dictionary have an official comment on the naming of the falcons?
Well, we celebrated, of course. This is fantastic. And Noah Webster actually has strong connections to the town of Amherst. He was one of the founders of Amherst College. And so it feels very, very appropriate that these birds would have these names.
Did you bring us any word wisdom when it comes to falcons?
Yeah.
Give us some bird word insight, Emily Brewster.
Well,
Because the naming conventions are bizarre.
Well, falcon is a word that came to English in the time of Middle English. It's ultimately Latin in origin. English speakers had words like bird. They even had the word thrush. Both of those words go all the way back to Old English, but the word falcon was new in the 14th century.
When you went to UMass. Oh, no, wait, sorry, right. That was only the 1900s.
Jesus.
1900s.
Why? When you say we went to school in the 1900s, it makes us feel like Nosferatu. Like, oh, we've been alive for hundreds of years.
Yes.
And every nightmare treads upon this earth.
Do you know the origin of the term peregrine falcon?
No.
I was going to ask this.
Because that's the type of falcons these are, right?
Yep, so Falco peregrinus is the full Latin term.
Ooh, yeah, you two library nerds are thrown down.
Do you know what the etymology of that is?
I do. So falcon comes from falx, which is Latin for sickle-shaped, and that's referring to the shape of the bird's wings and the talons and the beak. And then you've got peregrinus, which is also comes from the Latin for traveling or wandering, because peregrine falcons are known for migrating.
Ah.
Professor Brewster, grade her book report.
Well, excellent. But according to the Merriam-Webster etymology, the peregrinus translates or can be glossed as meaning pilgrim. And what it says in our etymology is that it is probably from the fact that the peregrine falcon's nestlings are impossible to catch unless they're out and about, because their nests are positioned in such a place they're most of the time very inaccessible. And so it's like they considered the little hatchling to be out on a pilgrimage, then to be caught and
Fledged and well, not fledged because that's getting out of the nest, but trained.
yes,
Pledged, because it's going to join one of the fraternities around here.
tamed, trained, right? Brought into human control.
Well, is that what happens with these peregrine falcons, Merriam and Webster, and the egg that we are on hatch watch for?
They are not tamed, they are not trained. These are wild birds, and we like to make sure people remember that. We have insight on Webster because he was banded. So Mass Wildlife put bans on him when he was a young chick. So we know that he was born in 2019 under the Calvin Coolidge Bridge in Northampton, Massachusetts. We don't know about Miriam because she is unbanded, so she's from some wild nest that Mass Wildlife is unaware of. But we do know, as I said, this was her first year last year being a mother, and Webster's an old pro at this by this point. So we've got 4 eggs. That's a full clutch. Peregrine falcons lay between 2 to 4 eggs. We're really hoping to see a really good success rate this year. Last year, unfortunately, with the weather and with her inexperience, we only had 1 sole surviving chick, but he grew up healthy, and he was spotted at the Quabbin after he fledged.
That's fantastic.
So the babies get banded when they grow up here in this particular clutch.
Yes, absolutely. We work very closely with Mass Wildlife on this project, and once the chicks hit about 3-ish weeks, then we bring them in, and we all go up to the roof, and there's a little flap in the back of the nest box where the Mass Wildlife folks will climb up. They'll open the hatch and put a net over the front so the chicks don't have a tendency to run off, and they'll grab them very carefully, put them in little bags, canvas bags, carry them down, and then they will put the bands on. There's a federal band and a state band, so they have 2 bands on, one on each of their legs. They like to say that the federal band is like the car's VIN number, and then the state band is like a license plate, so they're easily identifiable either way.
We're going to get them a real ID, or else they're not going to be able to fly.
Oh no!
Between states.
So are they on the roof of the W.E.B. Du Bois Library? Is that where they are?
Yes. So the roof, there's a flat area and then there's walls around it, and they are on the ledge of the wall. And some people, we want to make sure that people know that the nest box itself, when you see like the camera shaking, that's not the nest box moving. That's very secured to the roof. We have a camera arm that extends out, and the camera points towards the nest box, and it's very secure, but sometimes that's what you see moving in the wind.
So don't worry if you see like a mini earthquake when you're watching the falcon cam.
Right.
Do they ever get curious about the camera and go like right up to it?
Yes, Actually, if you look over there, we have an
There's-
old photograph of a very nice selfie of the. They love the camera arm as they get older. When they become juveniles and start branching out, which means exploring the area around the nest, they often like to perch on the camera arm and to walk around on it, and it's really fun to see them get so up close to it.
We're speaking with Lauren Hubbard, who is guiding us through the Falcon Cam here at the W.E.B. Du Bois Library at UMass campus. And you were talking about the different identifications of these falcons. In better times, when there isn't bird flu, sometimes this is a public event that people can come to see the banding of the baby falcons.
Well, it's not quite public, but we will invite certain people around campus to. We have the Mass Wildlife folks. We usually get someone to take photographs, and we try to record it so that the public can watch it. Mm-hmm. Last year, we tried to get people from the UMass band to come. Unfortunately, they weren't able because they were the ones who named our chick last year.
The marching band will probably scare the pants off of all of these falcons. They are huge and loud.
They are, but it was really sweet because we were celebrating their march in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, so they named the chick last year Ian Bandwich Hale. So Ian Hale was a drummer for the band, and then Bandwich rhymes with sandwich, and they thought that was funny, and so do we. So.
And they're a band, and they're banding the falcons. There's all sorts of puns that are rife for this.
Hopefully when we have chicks, we will send out the notifications on all of our social media when we're ready to band. And once we do that and we find out the sexes of the chicks, that's when we start the public naming contests. And anyone can enter. We put out a post on all of our social media platforms, so that'll be Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky this year. And you can also email us directly if you do not have social media, so you can send in your name suggestions. And the ones that get the most likes will be put into a final voting form, and then that link to the voting form is sent out again on our socials to the public so that anyone can participate. And we welcome participation. As a matter of fact, Cranberry, our previous female, was a kid's name suggestion.
Falcon McFalconface. That's the one I'm going with.
Oh, that gets suggested so much. Please do not suggest Falcon McFalconface.
Got any good Merriam-Webster baby names?
Oh, Merriam-Webster baby names.
We'll call one Shaneri. We'll call the other one Richard.
No.
We can see a falcon right now. Is that male or female?
You know, there's a few different ways to tell. I think that is Webster based on the coloration on his face. Merriam typically has a larger break in between her malar stripes and the gray on her crown. Okay. There's 3 different ways that we tell them apart. So obviously if you get to see their feet, Webster is banded, Merriam is not. Webster is also smaller than Merriam because of...
like Webster, the TV show in the 80s, from the 1900s.
Oh my God.
I'm a little short. Oh, you need a quarter? No, longer legs.
Well, it's a trait called sexual dimorphism in falcons, where the males are approximately a third the size of the females, and that's for the females' protection, but also to help the males catch the smaller, lighter, faster prey so that they are able to best provide for the family once they have the chicks that they need to feed. The third way to tell our specific 2 falcons apart is if you get to look at the feathers on their chest. So Merriam has thicker black bands on her chest feathers, and also they point upwards in an arrow. So I like to, when we talk to the students at the elementary schools about the falcons, I like to say, remember, M for Bounton, M for Merriam. And then Webster has thinner black stripes on his chest, and the little arrow pattern on his black stripes point downwards. And then we had a student say, well, if you look at their upper breast feathers, Merriam's are a little more beige than Webster's. So we were always looking for the students' input. They always have great things to say, great questions. We love getting to talk to the elementary school and middle school kids in the area.
Oh, that's so cool.
How long has UMass been monitoring the falcons?
Would you like the long answer or the short answer?
The long answer.
Okay, so the long answer is back in the mid-1900s, we had...
When Emily Brewster went to school.
Never gonna let that go, are you?
We all went to school in the 1900s.
That's true.
All of us here.
Well, I'm talking about like 30s, 40s
Okay.
era. That's when we started seeing an uptick in the use of chemical pesticides, especially with DDT. And it used to be thought of as this wonder drug that would protect crops. And also they used it on soldiers during World War II to prevent malaria. Unfortunately, it was definitely the opposite of a wonder drug. It caused a lot of health problems and medical issues, not just in humans, but in the environment around us. particularly when it comes to birds of prey. So we have, going up the food chain, you have the pesticides, and the bugs will eat the pesticides, smaller birds will eat those bugs, the larger birds will eat those, and it magnifies the amount of DDT that gets concentrated all the way up the food chain, so it's called biomagnification. So by the time it got to the birds of prey, it was so concentrated in their systems that it rendered them unable to reproduce because it caused their eggshells to be so thin that they were inviable. And this wasn't just in peregrine falcons, this was in a lot of different types of birds of prey. You hear about it at the bald eagles, California condors. It was really problematic. As a matter of fact, the peregrine falcon population in the northeast of North America, where we are, was completely extirpated. It was wiped out. There were no more peregrine falcons in the area. And that's when we get to Rachel Carson and Silent Spring and the start of environmentalism, as she brought all these issues to the public for the first time. That was when we started seeing changes in, the advent of the EPA and environmental protection laws and the banning of DDT except in extreme emergency cases so that we could prevent all of this from continuing. And then we get to Tom Cade, who was a professor at Cornell. He founded the Peregrine Fund. He was an avid birder and a falconer. And so he took those techniques that he learned as a falconer to help repopulate the peregrine falcons and bring them back from endangerment and near extinction. He would do something called hacking, which is not teaching them how to use a computer, although that would be pretty cool.
It's not that either, I'm assuming.
No, so it's an old falconry technique where they would take the chicks and they would put them in a wagon or a hack, put them up on the top of a hill, and then they would fledge. They would learn how to do all sorts of falcon stuff, and then the falconers would recapture them and train them for the use of falconry. So Tom Cade did that, except without the recapturing and training part, and instead of a wagon, he would build a giant wooden box, and he would put the falcon chicks in there, and they would have minimal human contact to give them food and check on them and make sure everything was okay. And then once they were ready to fledge, they just opened the box and let them out into the wild. The long story short of that is we had a hack box at UMass Amherst in the late 1980s. There were 2 graduate biology students who received 5 chicks from the Peregrine Fund themselves, and they set up a hack box on the Lincoln Campus Center, and they took care of them, again, with the minimal human contact until they were ready to fledge, and then off they went. Once falcons started to repopulate in the area, by the late 90s, we started seeing peregrine falcons back in the valley. And my colleague, the co-lead on the falcon team, Richard Nathorst, he's been working here for many years. He works at the physical plant. He was the one who petitioned campus to put up the nest boxes on the roof. So we have one on our roof. We used to have one on South College, which is a building next door to us. And those were put up because we wanted to encourage peregrine falcons to come back to the area where they used to live. And also it was intended to help mitigate the pigeon problem on campus.
Nice.
Because pigeon excrement is corrosive and causes a lot of damage to buildings and other structures, and it was costing the campus a lot of money to clean up that problem. And Richard thought, well, if we have the natural predators back, that would just really help take care of it, and it did.
It's like you killed 2 birds with... Oh no, wait a minute.
box.
That doesn't work for this. Yeah, we killed 1 bird with 1 other bird.
It took a couple years for the falcons to actually start using the nest box rather than just perching on it and flying in and out. But then we started having successful nestlings, and chicks were being reared. And I believe by 2012, we put up the live stream camera so then we could share our falcons with the world. And it's been great being able to connect with everybody about it.
Coming up, more with Emily Brewster, resident wordster from Merriam-Webster, and digital content editor Lauren Hubbard from the W.E.B. Du Bois Library about their 2 peregrine falcons, Merriam and Webster, and how you can be part of naming the chicks that are hatching on the roof right now.
And later, we wrap up National Poetry Month with the editor and interns behind Amherst College's iconic literary journal, The Comet.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM. Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. More from atop the W.E.B. Du Bois Library with UMass digital editor and falcon expert Lauren Hubbard, and a representative of the institution for whom this year's 2 falcons, Merriam and Webster, have been named for, our word nerd, Emily Brewster. You have a pile of falcon merch on this table.
I do. There used to be more, but we actually had to lend some of it out. Yeah, we have a lot of plush falcons. I'm a big stuffed animal collector, but we used to have campus put out some little falcon plushies. These are juvenile colored, so peregrine falcons, when they're juveniles, they're in shades of brown. And then after their first molt, they get to the characteristic gray and white colors. We have our digital media lab downstairs. They 3D print, and we've been asking them to print out some falcons. This was a test print. We actually put out about 100 of these throughout the library on April 1st as a fun thing for students. We love using the falcons to do outreach with our campus and the students. They love it, and it's just a really fun way to welcome people into a building that might not necessarily look as welcoming just because of the sheer size of it.
Yeah.
So we like to encourage people to come in, come for the falcons, stay for the resources.
Emily Brewster, do you have more bird insight or questions about the falcons of the W.E.B. Du Bois Library at UMass Amherst, Merriam and Webster?
Merriam and Webster. Well, I was interested when you said that the male is a third the size of the female, and the male is also sometimes technically referred to as a tiercel.
Yes.
And that word tiercel goes back to the Latin word meaning third.
Because it's a third the
Because
size.
it's a third the size. That's right.
It's also interesting, like Webster, the male falcon, and then Merriam was named after. But Merriam is not Merriam or Merriam, like the word Mary or the name Mary. It is a last name. We know Noah Webster, one of the founders of Amherst College. Who is Merriam?
We get letters written addressed to Miriam Webster.
Yeah.
Like Miriam and Webster.
Yeah.
She's the mom, he's the dad or something. But no, George and Charles Merriam had a printing and bookselling company started in Springfield, Massachusetts in 1831. And in 1843, they bought the rights to Noah Webster's dictionary and the rights to edit and do further editions of that dictionary. And that is how Merriam-Webster came to be. The name was actually changed in 1982.
Round about the time the falcons were coming around here. Do you know how many falcons total have been birthed on the library here?
Over 50.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yes.
And what about the overall population of peregrine falcons now here in the valley?
Well, it's interesting. We don't have an exact number. I would ask Mass Wildlife about that if you want more specifics. However, we do know that we have definitely seen an increase because what we'll do is we'll often see some territorial disputes on the roof the past couple of years, which indicates that, there's definitely a lot of falcons vying for the territories. And while we don't like to see the disputes, it's also kind of a reminder that, wow, we have definitely helped to bring this population back from when there was absolutely no peregrine falcons in the area left.
Besides the nesting pair, how often do you see falcons that have fledged here come back to campus?
So they actually don't come back to campus because this is their parents' territory.
Oh, hey.
So
Can't go home.
unfortunately not, but what our falcons and the falcons in Western Mass typically do is they will migrate their first year. So once they fledge the nest, they'll go typically to the shoreline because they love those shorebirds. And then once that first migration, first winter is done, they'll typically fly back this way and find their own territories. So while we don't see our chicks returning, we have seen a few of them around, spotted by their bands, by fellow birders. There is one of our chicks from 2019, I believe. She is living her best life in New York City as a mom on the church in 86th Street.
Oh, that's cool. It's cool that you can keep in touch with them all.
You just want to make sure that they're okay.
Yeah.
They're eating well, paying rent.
We learned from Professor Nathan Senner when we were birding on campus last week that the peregrine falcon is the fastest bird. How fast does a peregrine falcon fly top speed?
So it's actually the fastest speed that they have is when they are stooping or diving, and that can reach speeds of up to 240 miles per hour, which is faster than a race car in the Indy 500.
That's so crazy. Are they the fastest animal?
Yes.
Wow,
they're
so not just
absolutely-
bird.
Nope, they're the fastest animal on Earth.
Nice. I love that.
No wonder windows get them when they're going real fast.
Yeah. I live in Montague, Mass, and there are a lot of bald eagles that live in Montague, and Montague Community Television used to have an eagle cam at one of the nests there that came down in one of the storms. But there was always rumors that there were things in the eagle's nest that would be traumatizing to young viewers, like parts of cat. Because that's what these birds of prey eat. You have the falcon cam up right now, Lauren. What is the weirdest thing you've seen in the falcon cam in your days of monitoring this?
Well, fortunately, we do not see cats. That is not a primary food source for the peregrine falcons. They typically eat things like starlings, woodcocks, pigeons, rock doves. So really, we don't see a lot of weird things, just, feather storms sometimes when they clean their prey items to eat. What they will do is they will cache their prey items. So as you can see in the box, we have some little off to the side areas. That is for weather protection, but they also like to cache some prey there so that they can have like a midnight snack when they're incubating at some point.
And then we viewers don't have to look at just dead bird carcass in there when you're looking at the falcon cam.
I will say it's kind of like a face only a mother could love when you see the chicks being fed, and the parents will very carefully tear off the tiny little bits of the prey items to feed it to them, and they get really hangry the older they get.
If people want to watch this, these eggs could hatch anytime now, really?
Yeah, since we've hit the approximate 33 to 35 day mark, we're going to be starting to look for pips, which is the first hole in the egg that the chick will make with their little egg tooth that they have. So we're going to be asking for our falcon fan community to help us with this egg watch. So if you see anything on the camera, little white spots on the egg, little cracks in any of the eggs when the falcons stand up to rotate the eggs, please let us know. We are always happy to get information, screenshots, video grabs from our falcon fans, and we often repost those.
What's the easiest way to find this Falcon Cam stream for people?
So we have it available on our YouTube. So if you look up the UMass Amherst Libraries on YouTube, it's our current live stream, and anyone from around the world can access it. We also have a page on our website, library.umass.edu/falcons, and that will not only give you the link to the YouTube, but it'll give you some background on our falcons, as well as a link to our open falcon curriculum that is freely available online for grades pre-K through 12, and it's mapped to the Massachusetts Common Core standards, so anyone can incorporate it into their classroom. We tried to make it as easy as possible. We actually won an award for it when it came out, so we're really proud of that.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Thanks again to UMass resident W.E.B. Du Bois Library Falcon expert Lauren Hubbard, and to our word nerd Emily Brewster from Merriam-Webster, after whom these two falcons were named.
2 of Merriam-Webster's eggs have hatched so far, which means a public naming will commence. Check out the W.E.B. Du Bois social media and web pages to get involved and to watch the Falcon Cam.
Because they are so floofy and cute.
We watched a dead blue jay get pulled into the nest yesterday.
I know, they had a whole buffet. It was adorable. Up next, down the street from UMass, off the Common in downtown Amherst, to talk about poetry, prose, and publication with the editor-in-chief and 2 of the student interns behind Amherst College's literary journal, The Common.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by UMass Amherst School of Public Policy. Admissions now open for graduate programs in 2025. Learn how to become a changemaker at umass.edu/SPP.
It is the last day of National Poetry Month, and in its honor, we're taking a look at one of the longer-running collegiate journals in the area.
The Common is an award-winning print and digital literary journal published in the fall and spring. Issues of The Common include short stories, essays, poems, and images that embody a strong sense of place.
Based in Amherst, Massachusetts, the magazine is supported in part by Amherst College and the Common Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit. The Common also runs the Literary Publishing Internship Program at Amherst College, mentoring students in all aspects of literary publishing, and hosts public programming regularly, including LitFest in February.
Joining us to talk about the publication and its workings are Editor-in-Chief Jennifer Acker and student interns Kay Lim and Aiden Cooper. Thanks for joining us.
It's great to
Thanks
be
for
here.
having us.
Thank you.
I was poking around the Commons website, and my new favorite thing that I didn't know was there before is the Poetry SoundCloud page, where you can just hit play, and while you're going about doing whatever other business you might be doing, why not turn over to poetry and then just hear the poems read by the poets in the SoundCloud page? So that's a nice way of incorporating this ancient mode of communication of poetry with a digital age.
Jennifer, you've been there since the beginning. Can you talk to us about the origins of the Common?
So the Common was founded around this idea of sense of place. This is the idea that place matters to all of us humans, no matter where we are from. It matters to the way that we speak, the relationships that we have to the environment, also to other people. And so Sense of Place has really been at the heart of the magazine from the beginning. And around that mission, I also was very interested in creating a literary community, one that would exist both locally and globally. And so the local connection, of course, is our home at Amherst College, our work with all the student interns. We also publish a number of the writers, the wonderful writers who live in this area, but we also have writers from all over the world. So it's really been a thrill to grow the magazine over the last 15 years. This year is our 15th anniversary, and to add more types of programming, to see all the student interns come through the magazine. We've worked with almost 70 student interns over the years since we've started, and watching them grow and blossom into writers and editors and wonderful people has been a real joy.
Two of those student that are involved in the Common are with us right now, Kay Lim and Aiden Cooper. Kay, why don't you tell us what you're studying there at Amherst College and perhaps what you're hoping to do with the experience that you've garnered working with the Common?
Yeah, I am an English and economics major, and I'm actually graduating this May.
Congratulations!
And I'm going to be, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm going to be around for another year working with the Common as the literary editorial fellow, so that'll be a full-time position. I mean, I think something that's just really incredible about working for smaller presses or for literary magazines is that, you know, we get to do and try out a lot more of the work that goes into and a much wider variety of the work that goes into publishing. So I've worked on everything from fundraising to analytics to event planning, and of course the editorial work that's at the core of the magazine. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure what I want to do yet.
You already have a full-time gig for next year, so you're way better off than so many college students.
Yeah, and I'm just hoping that carries forward in the years after.
What about you, Aiden? The same question. How did you get involved in this? What have you learned, and what are you hoping to do with it?
Yeah, I got involved relatively recently. I've been around for about a year, but I'm an English major. I'm a junior. I have been also sort of floating around. I think what's really cool about the Common is we have different modules that us students get to kind of experience, and then we move on. So I've done fundraising. I'm currently doing social media. So I'm really just kind of expanding a lot of different skills that I think will be useful wherever I end up. I do think something involving publishing is in my future. I think probably in more of an academic setting, but I've really enjoyed being able to see all the inner workings of this beautiful magazine. We get some heavy hitters in our pages, and being able to speak with these writers, learn how their stuff works so that we can grow as writers. I feel like my craft has gotten much better since working with the Commons. I thought it was going to be mostly editorial work, and that's actually a very small section of what we do. That's really cool, and I think it's preparing me for a future in humanities.
Those are two student interns of the Common magazine out of Amherst College, Kay Lim and Aiden Cooper, and we're also speaking with the editor-in-chief of the Common on this, the last day of National Poetry Month, Jennifer Acker.
Can we talk about those internships and the fellowships as well? Because I feel like in the same way that Kay and Aiden have both said, they've learned a lot, but it wasn't necessarily what they were expecting to learn. Can you talk about the two programs in conjunction with the magazine, Jennifer?
Sure. When you come into college and you love literature, you love poetry, you love to read, you want to work in something that publishes those things. You want to work behind the scenes and sort of bringing that literature out into the world. And so that's what attracts students to the Common. But of course, anyone who has worked at a nonprofit or, at a newspaper or magazine out in the world knows that there is so much that goes into a publication. There's the editorial side of reading submissions, which is something that our students do, as well as editing them and then proofreading them and then getting them up on the website. But then there's the promotion, and then which includes the social media, and then there's the analysis of who's reading our stuff, and how can we grow our audience, and that's sort of the analytical part. We use people who know statistics, students who are good with graphic design. Aiden was talking about the work they have done with videos. It's really a very hands-on, enterprise with many moving parts.
I'm curious, Jennifer, in your time celebrating 15 years this year of the Common, we've seen the rise of social media become a phenomenon, especially, I think, with younger people who you are working with at Amherst College. How has social media impacted your work and poetry in general, I think, and people's access to to poetry. Is it more accessible now because Aiden's making videos and can post them on social media? Or does the distraction of social media push people further away from an art form that so many people already feel sadly alienated by?
Yes and yes. So I think we're looking at increased accessibility through social media. The Common runs a summer program for young writers, which our interns, Kay and Aiden and others teach in. And many of those high school students find out about our program via social media. Social media is complicated, as anyone who works in media knows, it's not always great for driving traffic directly to your site, to read more work. For a while, Twitter was doing that. Now that it's X, it doesn't really do that anymore. The Facebook algorithms are always changing. And so it's an asset, but it's a complication, and it doesn't always work in the way that you would like. The other side of what we do, of course, is a print publication that has no ads. You can open the pages, take it to a media-free zone and read it on your own without images bumping up, jumping out at you the way things do online. That's something that we offer and are really still quite committed to that print format.
And that's available in local bookstores in our area as well as across the country, right?
Definitely. Yep. It's available at Book Moon and at Amherst Books at the least.
Your digital output seems a bit more robust, or at least it's more frequent than the print one.
We've always done 2 print issues per year, and the idea is that the print issues are fat. They're like 220 pages. So this is a book, really, that we give people 6 months to read before the next issue comes out. And so this seems like a good amount of time to keep it by your nightstand for those moments when you have 30 minutes and you want to read a short story, or you want to dip into a poem. Print is still good for a lot of things. And the website is a joy also because we're able to publish multimedia content more often. It expands the number of writers we're able to publish, and it also is more accessible. We have no paywall on our website, so that means anyone from around the world with an internet connection can read everything that we publish.
We're talking about The Common, the literary magazine based at Amherst College with its editor-in-chief, Jennifer Acker, and 2 of the student interns, Kay Lim and Aiden Cooper, on this, the last day of National Poetry Month.
I'm curious, did you know about The Common before you applied to Amherst?
I had some friends in the area that actually grew up here. I'm personally from Ohio. So I knew about it kind of, but I didn't really know what The Common was about. I had maybe only read a few pieces online before actually arriving here.
Aiden, what about you and Kalisa's question? Did you know about The Common before you came here?
Not really. I was very much in the STEM side of things before I came to Amherst. I was kind of on track to become a doctor. That was what I wanted to do. And then I was like, well, no, I like English more. So I switched gears. I've always had a deep love of English. And so when I had my first tour of Amherst, I had a tour guide who was talking about The Common, and I found it very interesting because I've had experience leading student-run literary magazines before. It was something like I can start getting into the big leagues and figuring out how exactly these things work professionally. As soon as I got on Amherst campus, I was like, okay, this is something I want to be a part of and something that I think is interesting.
I think some of my question of that is that I went to Kenyon, and I know kids that went to Kenyon to work at the Review. Collegiate journals really do fit in this very interesting space. It's different, especially in nonprofit sector, as opposed to something that is more commercial, like your New Yorkers and like your Pushkins, like your Salts.
I honestly wasn't as familiar with literary magazines at all before coming here. I heard about the Kenyon Review because Kenyon is right there for me in Ohio, but I really didn't know of many literary magazines. But I think something that's really cool as we've been able to work more closely with the authors we publish and just other people in our community who read the magazine, who come to LitFest and all of these things, is I think that literary magazines really function as a lot of writers' starts, whether they're student-run literary magazines at colleges or these collegiate literary magazines that are more heavily associated with sometimes MFA programs or whatnot. And I think that it's really important that they exist, because how else are you supposed to break into the broader world of publishing? How are you supposed to put out a book if people haven't read like anything you've written, and there's not a space for that, you know?
Coming up, we'll hear how this literary magazine has changed the educational trajectory of Amherst student interns Kay Lim and Aiden Cooper, and more celebration of the Common with editor-in-chief Jennifer Acker.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the Handle Factory Community Clay Studio in Shelburne Falls, offering youth summer programs and spring adult classes in pottery and sculpture. HandleFactory.com.
I guess from the more esoteric side of things, and I alluded to this before, that sometimes poetry can be a barrier for people to enter, which is part of the reason why Khalees and I like to do so much poetry stuff, especially during National Poetry Month. We went to the Emily Dickinson Museum, and, we had Martina Spada on earlier this month. But in the Common Literary Magazine right now, the current issue, there is a fascinating interview with Richard Seiken talking about the lack of lexicon when it comes to metaphor and art in our society. And he likens the idea of learning multiplication tables and parts of speech from Schoolhouse Rock. And we all have a relationship with music in a way, but we don't have a relationship as a culture in the same way in this country with poetry. So tell us about your relationship to that and what you're bringing to the Common to try to help to develop that language for people to access this language. Let's start with you, Jennifer, because you've been doing this now for 15 years with the Common.
I was going to say, let's start with Aiden or Kay, because they're both poets, and I'm just a prose writer. But yes, no, I mean, we want to maintain a presence, a forum for people to publish their poetry, but more than that, we want people to read poetry. And so part of being an evangelist for literary magazines means being an evangelist for poetry. And for encouraging people to think about poetry as a part of their everyday life, and not just something sort of special or ethereal or something that you only read at funerals or graduations or these, or other occasions, but something where you can read it at a bus stop or, with your coffee in the morning. And Monty, as you were saying earlier, something that you can listen to, and that is an important part of poetry, of course, are the oral qualities. And one of the reasons why we do have so many poets record their work themselves so we can post it on the website.
Kay, what's your take?
I think that with social media, I see people like post poems like from a few accounts that, will post like a daily poem on their stories all the time. And I think that's like one cool way that I've seen social media being used to make poetry more accessible. I think also, like you mentioned Seiken, and I think that Seiken's Crush is a huge like first poetry collection that gets a lot of people, or has gotten a lot of people I know into poetry in the first place. I love working with like young writers. I also teach through a different program aside from our summer program that we do, and like working with young writers in that space, and a lot of them either have never tried writing a poem before, or some of them only have ever entered through the world of like slam poetry, which I think is an amazing way to enter. I think like those are the ways in which I've most closely worked with people and trying to like increase interest in poetry. I think I want to hand it over to Aiden, because Aiden actually runs the poetry club here at Amherst College.
Yeah, I think with what I've been trying to do is really expand, like get people at our college to engage in poetry in whatever way they feel comfortable. I mean, I've started this weekly meeting called Poetry Parlor, where everybody gets together in one of our common rooms and we just talk about poetry. We share poetry, we talk about what we're reading. It's a very sort of open space. But I think what's fascinating about poetry is once you begin to enter that world, you begin to see it more and more. Even the ways we talk generally, like, I don't know, like spending time, that's equating time to money. It's like there are these different phrases in English that it's central to how we speak. And I think the more that people are given access to the deep noticing in the language and in the world around them where poetry is happening. I think that's the best. And as someone who did start kind of with Saiken, like Crush was one of the first poetry collections I ever read. Ocean Vuong is another fantastic poet, I think, that a lot of people my age get started with and then just go off to the races. But I do think like there is a kind of tendency in where we are right now socially to just like sort of bear our heads down, get the work done, and poetry seems floaty and unnecessary sometimes. And I think it's essential right now to take time and spend time noticing something like and really trying to put down that moment on paper, that sense of togetherness it brings when you wade into the page, you walk along with the poet who's writing. That's what the common is all about. It's the common space. You're walking through a sort of town common with all of these different people and all of their stories. And it's a very intentional storytelling and a very intentional togetherness that I think is something we need. And I do think the common is doing a pretty good job at
well, I will
bringing
quote,
people in.
I will quote Saiken in the common again, leading into what you've said there, Aidan, where he's saying, for a while I thought I wanted to study art therapy. Not long after I started, I saw a fundamental flaw. We have taken the arts out of daily living, and it has made us limited and sick. Art therapy is an attempt to leak a small amount of arts back into regular living. And so there's a lot of truth in that, and a lot of truth into what the common is trying to do mission-wise into continuing to leak that arts, to turn STEM folks who want to be doctors into STEAM folks, or as I like to call them, meats folks.
Yes, that's the look. I was going to say that there's definitely a parallel in this disconnect between like the folks who insist that you talk straight or be very direct about the thing that you're speaking of, and somehow that loses your ability to find new perspective on the world. But that wasn't my question. My question was going to be, especially for Aidan and then Kay, working with the common, how has that changed your perspective on the other courses you're taking at Amherst?
Well, I'll just say, like, with all of my work, place has become very important. I'm currently writing a fiction piece. It's one of the first fiction pieces I've ever done, and it's about a road trip. And I'm so attached to the different places that they're going through. I think just where my eye has landed has changed dramatically because of the different things I'm reading through the common, because of how important I find the common's mission to be. But I think also just in the sense that I was a biologist, and that was something that was very interested in for me, and viewing the body as a place and things and bacteria working in our bodies. Those are all things that I've always been interested in my poetry, and it's allowed me to, when I was still on that track, which I have abandoned, but when I was still doing that, it was like, oh, what I'm doing here is actually quite poetic, and it's actually there's a different way of looking at this. That's not like the sort of hard-hitting scientific writing. It's more, it can be a sort of artful, experiential wandering into. So that's been something that I've really cherished.
Amherst College, we have the meats.
Oh my God, please no.
Kay, what's your take on Khalees's question?
Yeah, well, for one, in my entire time at Amherst, I have been a part of the college's student newspaper. And it's completely student-run. We don't have a faculty advisor or anything. And so I think that just some of the learning how to do different things that need to happen to make a publication happen, even though a newspaper is very different and journalism is well, I wouldn't say it's very different, but it's different than, literary magazine publishing. So I think for one, I took a lot of those skills and the ways that we approach things in the common to that space. But I think in terms of classwork, I think I could equate some of this to maybe just being around Jen and the way that she speaks about certain pieces and the pieces that catch her eye in the submission queue and everything. But Jen was an anthropology major at Amherst, and I think that I can see that in some of the ways that we approach just the breadth of pieces we are publishing, also the particular types of things that I think have been starting to draw my eye. It's hard to say the ways that the common has influenced my classes without also thinking about the ways that my classes have then gone back and influenced the ways that I read pieces. But I think in the past year and a half of being at Amherst, I feel like I've taken a lot of anthropology classes as well, and I'm thinking a lot about therefore place in that space, and then place in the common, and this literary space. And I've begun to think about like a lot of our pieces as sort of like an ethnography of the self, you know.
Are you ever going to bring back the Weekly Writes program?
Oh yeah, we run it twice a year.
Yeah, no, we actually just wrapped up like a week or two ago, like our latest round of Weekly Writes, and it'll be back for the summer.
What is Weekly Writes?
Weekly Writes is a very inexpensive subscription program in which you get 3 writing prompts delivered to your inbox every week. You do your homework, that you have signed up for, the homework you have asked for, and then you upload it to our system, and then we send you a little like congratulatory note saying like, congratulations, you did your writing this week. And so we're really just trying to encourage people to keep up their writing practice. We have a poetry version and a prose version. So whatever kind of writer you are, there is something for you.
Celebrating 15 years of Amherst College's The Common, the literary magazine, with its editor-in-chief, Jennifer Acker, and 2 student interns, Kai Lim and Aiden Cooper. Thanks for talking poetry with us on this, the last day of National Poetry Month.
Thank you. It's great to be
Thanks for
here.
having us.
Thank you.
On the next Fabulous 413, we speak with a trio of students who've just completed a particularly difficult task, writing picture books about slavery.
We head back to Amherst to speak with a cohort of Slavery North students whose work is showing as a part of the exhibit Sewing History, Reaping Justice.
And to hear from 2 noted scholars on the subject of slavery in children's books, Raphael Rogers and Charmaine Nelson.
We'll also explore a cornucopia of intersecting performances happening in Northampton and Turners Falls with Nero Orchestra and Egg Truth Productions that you can see this weekend and beyond.
See, we escape Amherst eventually.
I'm Monty Belmonte.
I'm Khalil Smith. We'll talk to you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.